The truth is, we live in a world of excess disguised as necessity. We wake up to a dozen notifications, check apps before we even check in with ourselves, rush into a day packed with obligations, and quietly pray that doing more will finally make us feel like we're enough. But the more we chase, the emptier we feel. This is not a coincidence. It's a design flaw in how we've been taught to live. We've been conditioned to believe that more equals better. More success, more money, more followers, more validation. But what if that formula is broken? What if the endless pursuit of more is the very thing keeping us from what matters most? This is where the magic of simplicity begins to reveal itself, not as a loss, but as a return to presence, to clarity, to the kind of stillness that lets you see again, and to the kind of space that lets you feel again. Let's go even deeper. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you truly felt at peace? Not because everything was perfect, but because you weren't caught in the chaos. Maybe it was in nature, or in a quiet moment with someone you love, or even in the middle of doing something mundane like sipping tea or folding laundry. That's not an accident. Simplicity creates the conditions for presence, and presence is the birthplace of real joy. Not the high of achievement, but the quiet hum of being alive. When you strip away the noise, you begin to notice the miracle of the ordinary. You start to realize that life isn't hidden in some far-off goal. It's here, in this breath, in this moment, and in this body. And most of us are too busy to notice.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
But here's the dilemma. Modern life is not designed to be simple. It's designed to consume your attention. Companies, algorithms, systems, they all compete for your time, your focus, your craving. And the more distracted we are, the more disconnected we become, not just from each other, but from ourselves. That's why simplicity is not just a lifestyle choice. It's an act of rebellion. It's a philosophical stance. It's a refusal to be pulled apart by a world that profits from your fragmentation. When we live simple, we reclaim our attention. We reclaim our time. We reclaim our soul. Now let's talk about why this matters on a practical level. Simplicity isn't just about having fewer things. It's about having fewer mental tabs open, fewer unspoken obligations, fewer layers of performance. It's about freeing up energy for what actually matters. Think of your attention like sunlight. Spread too thin, it warms nothing. Focused, it can set a fire. Living simple means channeling that light toward the things that truly deserve it, relationships that feed you, work that aligns with your values, thoughts that bring you closer to peace instead of pulling you into anxiety loops. And when you do this, you begin to feel something powerful: freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, whenever you want, but the deeper freedom of not being owned by your cravings, your ego, or your calendar. But let's be real. Simplicity is not always easy. Because we've been wired to associate more with success. Letting go can feel like failure. Saying no can feel selfish. Choosing less can feel like missing out. But Watts would say, the meaning of life is just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple. And yet, everybody rushes around in a great panic, as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. That's the illusion we must break. That life is something to be earned, but that joy is something to be bought. That peace is something to chase. Living simple reveals the truth. You already have it. But you've buried it under layers of shoulds, maybes, and what ifs. So what does this look like in action? It doesn't mean renouncing everything and moving to a cave unless that's your thing. It means learning to say no to what clutters your life and yes to what nourishes it. It means turning off your phone and turning toward your breath. It means choosing depth over width, presence over performance, essence over image. It means asking yourself, what do I actually need? What feeds me? What distracts me? What drains me? It means recognizing that simplicity is not subtraction, it's refinement. It's distilling your life down to what is essential and letting everything else fall away. I want you to consider this. Could it be that the simplicity you resist is the very doorway to the life you secretly long for? Could it be that in slowing down, turning inward, choosing less, you gain access to more aliveness than you've ever known? The philosopher Lao Tzu said, to attain knowledge, add things every day. To attain wisdom, remove things every day. Simplicity is wisdom in motion. It's the art of sculpting your life until only truth is left. And in that truth, there is beauty. There is grace. There is finally room to breathe. This is your invitation, not to overhaul your life in one sweeping gesture, but to begin right now with a single act of letting go. Maybe it's a thought you don't need to believe anymore, a possession that no longer brings you joy, an obligation that drains you, a habit that numbs you. Start small, but start. Let that one act be a pebble in the pond. Watch the ripples spread. Watch how life begins to respond to your shift in energy. And most importantly, watch how you begin to come back to yourself, not the self you've constructed, but the self you've always been underneath it all. Because in the end, the magic of living simple is not that it makes life easier. It's that it makes life real. It brings you back to the center, to the breath, to the moment, to the quiet, powerful truth that this is enough. You are enough. Let's take this even further, because if you're still with me, you felt it. That subtle shift, that inner pull towards something quieter, deeper, truer. Simplicity doesn't just clear your schedule, but it clears your soul. And when that clearing happens, what remains is not emptiness, it's space. And in that space, the real miracle begins. You start to feel rich. Not in the way we've been taught to define wealth, bank accounts, luxury, excess, but in a way that no one can take from you. Inner wealth. The kind of richness that comes not from having more, but from needing less. The kind of joy that isn't earned, but revealed. And here's the most astonishing part, that wealth was never missing. It was just buried under all the noise. Alan Watts once said that desire is a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get what you want. Think about how many contracts you've signed. How many promises you've made to your own peace. I'll be happy when I get the job, the partner, the car, the recognition, the body. And when we get those things, the goalpost moves, but the contract renews. The craving continues. Isn't that strange? That we keep running toward fulfillment through means that have never actually fulfilled us. That's not human failure, it's human conditioning. We've been sold a version of happiness that relies on accumulation. But the truth is, happiness has never been about adding more, but it's about removing the lie that you were ever lacking. Living simply is not just a rejection of excess. It's a return to wholeness. It's the decision to stop outsourcing your joy and start reclaiming it from within. When you truly understand that less is everything, you begin to see abundance everywhere, and in the way sunlight hits your skin, in the sound of rain tapping on the window, in the quiet comfort of a conversation with someone who sees you, in the breath that enters your lungs without effort. These moments don't scream. They whisper, and in a world addicted to noise, it takes courage to listen. But let's not romanticize simplicity. It's not always peaceful. It can be disorienting at first. Because when you strip away the distractions, you're left with yourself, with your thoughts, with your fears, with your unmet needs. And that's where the real work begins. Simplicity exposes what we've been avoiding. It asks us to sit in the quiet and face the parts of ourselves we've been drowning in busyness. That's why many people resist it, because it's easier to scroll than to feel. It's easier to buy something new than to face the ache of not knowing who you are without your possessions, your achievements, your image. But if you can stay with that discomfort, if you can breathe into the silence rather than run from it, you will find something extraordinary. You will find that you are not empty. You are vast. You are not lacking. You are abundant. And that realization changes everything. Because once you realize that joy, peace, and fulfillment are states of being, not products of acquisition, you stop chasing, you stop grasping, and you start living. So here's a question to sit with. What if everything you're trying to get is only blocking you from what you already are? What if the pursuit of happiness is what's making you unhappy? What if the real treasure is not in the next thing, but in the space you create by letting go of the need for the next thing? Let's bring this into the body. Simplicity lives there too. Think about how your body feels when you're overwhelmed, tight, tense, contracted. Now think about how you feel when you're doing something simple that you love: walking, cooking, listening to music, laying on the grass. Your body relaxes. Your breath deepens. Your mind softens. Simplicity is not a concept, but it's an embodied experience. You can feel it. And when you begin to build your life around that feeling, around that inner spaciousness, you begin to live from the inside out. You live not to impress others, but to express your truth. You live not to accumulate, but to appreciate. You live not on the surface, but from the root. This shift creates a ripple effect in every part of your life. In your relationships, simplicity allows for real connection. You stop performing. You start listening. You stop needing others to complete you and start meeting them as whole beings. In your work, simplicity brings clarity. You stop scattering your energy across 100 tasks that don't matter and start focusing on the few that do. In your spiritual life, simplicity opens the door to presence. You stop seeking enlightenment as a goal and realize it's found in the ordinary washing dishes, tying your shoes, breathing in and out. And here's the wild twist. When you live simply, you actually become more impactful. Because your energy is no longer diluted. Your actions come from alignment, not obligation. And your presence becomes magnetic not because you're trying to be someone, but because you're finally being yourself. Simplicity strips away the noise and reveals your essence. And essence is what resonates. Essence is what changes lives. So now we arrive at the deeper layer of this journey. Simplicity is not just about how you live. It's about how you relate to life. It's about seeing what's real beneath what's loud. It's about trusting that truth doesn't need to be complicated to be profound. In fact, the most profound truths are usually the simplest. You are alive. You are here. You are enough. Everything else is commentary. So let me ask you with total sincerity, what would your life look like if you stopped trying to make it impressive and started trying to make it real? What if the hidden magic of simplicity is that it frees you from the exhausting need to prove anything to anyone, including yourself? This is not a performance. This is a homecoming. Simplicity is the doorway back to yourself. And the more you walk through it, the more you realize you never needed to chase what you already are. You never needed to add anything to become whole. You only needed to remember. So here's your sacred task, your invitation, your challenge. Start subtracting. Start releasing. Start saying no, not out of fear, but out of devotion to what matters. Let your life become a poem instead of a resume. Let your heart become a home instead of a trophy. Let your presence become your message, your offering, your legacy. Because in the end, the truth is gloriously simple. The less you carry, the more you can feel. The less you chase, the more you can see. The less you try to be someone, the more you become everything you already are. There is a kind of silence that isn't the absence of sound, but the presence of something far greater. It's not empty, it's alive. It pulses with meaning, with presence, with awareness. And this silence, which many of us never truly touch, is the deepest secret of simplicity. It's not just that living simple makes your life easier or cleaner or more manageable. It's that it reconnects you to a rhythm that's always been there, beneath the noise, beneath the mental chatter, beneath the social performance. A rhythm that doesn't need to be created, only heard. And the only way to hear it is to get quiet enough, to simplify enough, to stop long enough. Alan Watts often spoke of the tail, the way, as something you don't chase or force, but something you tune into. Simplicity is the tuning fork, and the silence it opens is not sterile, it's sacred. Let's be honest, most of us are afraid of silence, afraid of what we might hear in it, afraid of what we might not hear. We fill our days with podcasts, playlists, background noise, scrolling, multitasking because the quiet is where our illusions begin to unravel. And yet, that unraveling is exactly what we need. Because when the illusions fall away of who we're supposed to be, what we need to have, what we need to prove, we are left with something so rare in this world, it almost feels like a miracle. Our true self. Not the curated self, not the striving self. Just the naked, breathing, aware, observing presence that has always been there, quietly witnessing our lives unfold. This is why simplicity isn't just about external minimalism, but it's about existential honesty. It's about no longer pretending that the next purchase, the next achievement, the next relationship will finally make us feel complete. It's about being still enough to realize we already are, but we've been too busy to notice. The silence of simplicity doesn't scream. It doesn't sell. It doesn't flash. But it holds everything. It's the space in which true insight arises. It's the canvas on which all color can appear. And once you've touched that silence, even for a moment, the rest of life begins to reorganize itself around it. So let me ask you something few people ever truly consider. Have you ever really met yourself, not the version of you that others see, but the one that exists in pure stillness, without a script, without a plan? Who are you when there's nothing to do, nothing to fix, nothing to chase? If that question terrifies you, that's okay. It should, because it's the question that strips everything false away. And that's what simplicity demands, not comfort, but truth. And in the silence that follows, we begin to hear the subtle song of life again. The breeze through the trees. The rhythm of our own breath. The wordless wisdom that lives not in books, but in being. It's in this space that you start to notice something else, true connection. Not the kind of connection that comes from constant contact or shared opinions, but the deeper kind. The kind that arises when two people sit together in silence and don't need to fill it. The kind that shows up when you walk through nature and realize you're not separate from it, but of it. The kind of connection that doesn't require words because it's felt in the bones. Living simply makes space for this kind of connection. Because you're no longer rushing past life, you're meeting it fully, intimately, unfiltered. And this is where simplicity becomes sacred. Not because you've joined a monastery or followed a spiritual path, but because you've allowed the sacred to meet you in the ordinary. In the act of pouring tea, in folding laundry, in watching the sun rise without photographing it, in listening to someone without preparing your response. These moments aren't small. They're everything. They're the places where the divine hides in plain sight, waiting for us to slow down enough to notice. Simplicity doesn't create meaning, it reveals it. But to live this way, we have to unlearn so much. We have to unlearn the idea that value comes from complexity, that depth must be dramatic, that doing is more important than being. Watts would remind us that nature is the most profound teacher of all, and yet it operates with effortless simplicity. Trees don't strategize their growth. Rivers don't resist their path. Birds don't question their song. And yet, we call them beautiful, wise, perfect. Why can't we allow ourselves to be like that? And to be simple, to be enough, to be in tune with the pulse of life, rather than trying to outsmart it. This is not a rejection of ambition or creativity or achievement. It's an invitation to root those things in presence, to let your doing emerge from your being. Because when you act from simplicity, your actions are infused with clarity. They're not reactions, they're responses. They're not compensations for some inner lack, they're expressions of inner fullness. That's what makes them powerful. That's what makes them sustainable. Simplicity doesn't diminish your impact, it amplifies it, because it aligns it with what's real. So let's ground this. What does it actually look like to live simply in a complex world? It looks like saying no to things that aren't aligned, even if they're shiny. It looks like creating space in your day for stillness, even if it's 5 minutes. It looks like choosing presence over productivity, connection over convenience, and truth over trend. It looks like asking yourself regularly, what am I doing that adds noise? And what can I release to return to peace? It looks like daring to live a life that's not about performing for others, but about being at home with yourself. And slowly, over time, this becomes a way of being. Not something you do, but something you are. You become someone who listens more deeply, who sees more clearly, who loves more freely. Not because you become better, but because you become less distracted, less tangled in the web of appearances. Simplicity doesn't make you superhuman. It makes you human deeply, tenderly, powerfully human. And in that humanness, you begin to hear the silence again, not as absence, but as presence, not as void, but as fullness. And you realize that the silence has been speaking to you all along, in the way your body whispers when it's tired, in the way your heart aches when something's off, in the way joy appears unannounced when you're not chasing it. This is the sacred pulse of life, and it doesn't need to be earned, only noticed, only honored, and returned to. So maybe the real magic of living simple isn't that it changes your life, but that it returns your life to you, piece by piece, breath by breath, until you remember what you've always known but forgotten, that this is enough, that you are enough, that the miracle was never somewhere else, waiting to be found. It was always here, waiting in the silence, waiting in the stillness, waiting in the simple, sacred act of being alive.